So when you first start Traktor, you're going to get this nice little splash screen, but we don't want to click on them because I'm going to show you all those. You don't need to do that. So let's click that button at the bottom, never show again, and let's get started. First impressions, the GUI looks really nice and clean as normal. We have our Traktor logo, our MIDI input indicator, whether we're connected to a controller or not, the icon whether it's mute or not, and then we have our CP usage. Now with Traktor 3, the load gauge was a lot bigger than that, and I actually prefer that because we really need to see if we are getting to the stage where our computer might freeze up. But luckily I've got a big enough screen on this one. Then we have our main out levels, time, battery, record. Over here we have the same options as before: essential, extended, browser, mixer, which is my personal favorite and the only one I use, parallel, and preparation. Going to put it back into mixer so you can see everything. Then we have this new icon, which is the browser button again, so we can click that, and also spacebar works as well. Then we have our preferences, but I'm going to leave that for now because we can go into that in a bit later. Our cruise mode. This time our show tooltips is on the window. Instead of having to go through preferences, we can now just click this, which is nice, and then when you hover over something it will give you the description of what it is. This is a really handy feature that Native Instruments has always had, and like I say, you'll know when you don't need it anymore when it starts to get annoying. So we can keep that on for now. Then our full screen mode, and then our logo with our serial number and all the jazz. Starting from the left again, we've got our FX1, and then we've got our loop recorder. Then we go over to Snap, Quantize Link, and then we have our audio with our tempo, master, plus and minus, master, our main, then we have our limiter, and then FX2, and underneath there we have our audio recorder. Again, everything else looks pretty similar on the deck. You can double click on the top bar to make it different sizes. Click on the letter and you've got all the normal options as well. Nothing else is different on here. If we drop down, we can see the move, the cue, and the grid. Now the grid has a couple of different things this time, but I'll go through that when we look at the flexible grid markers. Then everything else is standard here. The usual filters and effects. The only difference I can see is we've got the aux on the left hand side this time instead of over here with the headphone volumes and mix. Browser looks exactly the same. So let's take a look at the settings. Audio setup. For those of you who've never used Traktor before, check out my video on the Traktor 3 where I go in a deep dive of the preferences and exactly what they do. Check that out first. I'm not going to go into too much depth on this video because I want to look at all the new features. But a quick whiz through, we have our audio devices, sample rates up to 96,000. Our buffer size still at 64 and 4096. I like to have mine on 512 or 256, but let's just leave it like that for now. We still have our same phono line, routing, multi-core processing. Auto routing, exactly the same. You can make it mono if you want to. And then you've got the external mapping as well. Let's leave it on internal because I've got an S4. And then our output routing. Now this may look different to yours because I've got an S4 Mark III, which means I'm capable of being able to put in phono lines in different channels and mic lines. So if you have an S2, this can look different to yours. External sync, the same. Timecode setup, the same. Loading, I've just added loading and only into stop deck, and that's how I like it. Now I'm going to change this to shift drag and this one to drag. Now we're going to look at this in a bit, but this is when you make your tracks stems, and I want to make sure that my normal drag load is just the track and my shift drag is the stem version. I know that sounds confusing, but I'll get to that later on in the video. Just untick these. Transport, I leave at 8%. That's my personal preference. Then we have tempo sync, scratch, auto detect. This is all the same as I have normally. My decks layout, I like to have advanced 4 decks personally with a live input at the bottom right, but I changed that. I'm going to leave everything exactly the same because this is exactly how I like it. The only difference is I changed this to key. So when I load up a track, you'll be able to see, if I load this track up into A, you can see the key is there. I know I can see it there as well, but I'm so used to not having this because I've used Traktor since the start. I just automatically put this on. Track warning, I leave it 30 seconds. Player marker, I like in 50. Zoom default's fine for me. Remix decks, I leave as is because that's exactly how I want it. Mixer, same EQs, no new ones in there. This is where you can add different mixer effect slots. I leave mine with a noise, dual delay, time gator and reverb. To be honest, I only really use noise and time gator because I use my effects at the top. Leave all these on, enable auto gain, new. Now, we will talk about Ozone later, so I'm going to leave it in transparent for now. This is just a limiter. And again, one of my videos, I cover the best sound you can get, but that was an older video and it's slightly changed again. And I'm going to leave it -3 dB. With the external mixing mode, I don't know if you've ever used this, but it means certain controllers can be used standalone as just a mixer. And again, you can look at these, you can change them however you want. And we're going to look at Ozone later. Classic and transparent, I always have it on transparent, but again, this is preference. Ozone Maximiser, which I've just talked to you about, I'll go back to that. Global settings, it's just the top bar, which I always want on. I want to see what's going on. And then you can choose left and right loop recorder and audio recorder. I always want to make sure the full screen goes to the desktop size. In here I can show tooltips, but once again they've added tooltips here now, which is pretty cool. And just I can delete everything else. Effects are exactly the same. Again, you can change everything on the screen, dropping down here, but you can also change it on here as well. If I do effects 1, let's say effects 2, you can go send, insert, post fader. And if you go down to here, you've now got the option to do pattern play, which again, I know I've said this a lot, I'll show you later on down the video. Mix recorder is the same. The only thing I change is to get that to 2 gig. Basically means it's when it splits the file. Most people have got enough storage now to have that 2 gig. You don't want to have to join that together afterwards. Loop recorder, I leave as is. Streaming, I don't use Beatport streaming. I don't use any streaming service while I'm DJing. I have everything that I've purchased myself, so I leave that as is. Broadcasting, I used to use this when I used to do internet radio. Pretty handy, but I don't use it much more now. But it's self-explanatory, it's pretty easy to use. Browser details, if you want to change your fonts and size, etc. This one, the show the preview player, if I click this and go down to here, you can see it, the preview player. So I can drag this into here and listen to it before I load it up. But to be honest, I've never used this and I always have it ticked off. Up to you. You can then change all the different bits and pieces here, have a play around with it, get your style and what you want. Layout manager, this is where I just showed you up the top here, and you can make your own in here. So you can make your own bespoke layout, and that's entirely up to you. I use Mixer all the time, so I don't really need to. In fact, sometimes I'll delete the others because I never use them. Like if I go to Essential, I can just remove it because I never use it. So I just keep it in Mixer. It's obviously up to you. One thing that you may have seen, which Traktor 3 didn't allow, is I can actually leave preferences open now and still affect the GUI, which I think is really, really cool, because before you'd have to try it, close it, try the thing, reopen it, and it's just a pain. So this is, just nice to have. File management, I leave as is because I don't want tracks importing when I load up Traktor. I want to do it on my own. I did get a comment asking if you would have to reanalyze all your tracks from Traktor 3 to 4. The short answer is yes, because it is now a standalone Traktor program, so you can run Traktor 3 and 4. They are separate, but they do share certain files, so just be careful. But if you do want to import your playlists, you can do that via your track collection, and you can import music folders, etc. And if you've got settings from another Traktor, S3, then you can use this to import them as well. Here I use everything as standard as well. Analyze options, I always have automatic, which covers the whole range. And they can do automatic, beat marker, and hot cues. Here we can choose between musical and open key. Musical means these keys down here, A minor, B flat, E flat, etc. Most people use open key because it's easier. unless you know your music theory. Controller Manager, this is where you will map buttons to everything, change configurations, etc. Again, entirely up to you. And you've got everything that you've got plugged into Traktor at the moment will show up here. Then we've got the actual control options. So the X1 Mark III, the S4 Mark III, and the F1. And one thing you might want to see as well is you can actually change the keyboard, because the keyboard has hotkeys and all other options as well, so you can change all this. I don't want to go too into the controllers preferences, because you might not have an X1, S4 and F1. You might have something different, but I always make sure that absolute and not relatives on, because I don't get on with relative at all. I like mine absolute, which is exactly then what it is. Like what it shows is what it does. And then I'm going to have my ticks when nudging on fine. Jog wheel tension I can change, but 50's fine. 33 revolutions, and then you can recalibrate and stuff if you want to. Everything else I just keep the same. That is the start of TRAKTOR PRO 4. Let's take a look at the next section. So I mentioned the Ozone Maximiser. Essentially, and I don't want to dumb this down too much because native instrument will be like, no, David. But essentially, it's kind of a compressor / limiter. So first of all, to enable it, we go onto internal mixing mode and we change it to Ozone and click enabled. You will see at the top here now, it's changed to Boost Limiter Enabler. Let me just show you that. So if we hover over, enables the selected type of limiter boost for the outgoing audio signal. Whereas before, if we unclick enabled, we've got transparent, and you see it's just a limiter, whereas Ozone is a boost limiter. Now, I'm going to leave this at -3. Now you can go to the Ozone Maximiser, and I'm going to leave that as +3 to kind of make up for it. And then we have a preset which is fast or smooth. So fast will obviously hit it quicker and stop it quicker. With smooth is more, more rounded. Let's leave it on fast and let's take a look. Now I'm going to leave this open so you can see if anything gets hit with the limiter. And we're going to load up this track here. And we're going to press play. Now, if I change it to boost, let's go back to number 1 and let's put it on a loop. And now we're going to play it and you'll hear the difference between the boost on and off. So this at the moment is on off. And this is on. I have to say that makes quite a big difference. I mean, plus 3 dB is quite a difference anyway, but I'm quite surprised how much that affects it. If you look up here, you'll see the orange marker. So where there would be a limiter line, if I now do this, I mean, you've got loads of headroom. You see it goes into the red. Now with this on, now it's not doing the red now, but look over here. So it's effectively limiting that amount. Now some people don't understand that the harder you push it, the more the limiter will push back, which in effect can make it quieter. There's a great story by Mojax, he said. I'll never forget it, it's really good. You should go and check Mojax out. But he talks about limiters and how people think you need to turn it up louder. But when there's a limiter, it will start getting quieter. So you want to get it down to 0 dB. But I would never have it that loud anyway, but you've got a safety mechanism. I don't particularly want it to hit the limiter at all. So if we have it on boost, +3 to make up for the -3 in the other option. It's loud, very loud. Now I'm going to bring it into somewhere that has even more stuff on. Now the interesting bit here is this is louder than this part. So let's take the boost off. Let's have a listen to the difference between this bit and this bit. Okay, so now if we put boost on, I don't know if you heard that. It is compressing and drawing out quieter notes. which is pretty cool. You can have this on, you can do whatever you need. It might be a good thing if you're using different types of speakers that not quite kicking out enough, or you need just that little bit of extra. Ozone 4 is really good for DAWs as well. So if you do use Ozone 4 on your master track of like Ableton or whatever you use, Logic, it actually helps with your master mixing, kind of. So check that out, Ozone 4. It was free for a little while. I don't know if it still is. Up to you if you want it or not, or you can just have just the limiter on, which is this. There's the dip. So entirely up to you, but that is the Ozone Maximiser. Now let's talk about something that I find the most interesting of the updates. I personally think this and the flexible time grid is the best. In my opinion, I'm going to get the most out of it. But let's talk about making stems from any song. Pretty sweet. So in order to do that, we just click on a track and it says generate stems. That is it. And this will run whilst you're playing stuff. So just to prove it, let's play this and let's play this with our volumes down. Just to prove, it doesn't matter what's going on in there. Can't sound any worse than my DJing. Let's put on these as well, just to give it a good old load. And that one and that one and that one. Now, let's take in the warehouse, right click, generate stems, and it is doing it. You see it's doing it down here. Source separating in the warehouse. For those of you who want to know more about this, I've got a video coming up with RX11 to show you what it is doing and how you can tweak it. But this, for DJs, is going to be fantastic. And you don't need extra controllers. You don't need anything else. You can use your F1s, you can use your S4 buttons, you can use your X1s. If you've got an S5, a D2, an S8, anything like that will work. You can also map other MIDI controllers to this as well to be able to use them. But you can see, yes, it's taken a little bit of time, but it's doing it on the fly. We could have this running while we're DJing, no worries at all. And it's done it. So let's stop everything. Now let's take a look in the warehouse. If we drag this over, you will now see that it has a stem side. If you see this, you'll know it's a stem file as well. Now, because we made it from a single track, you have options. Now, if we go back to our preferences and we go to loading, do you remember I showed you shift drag would be the stem, drag would be the track. What that means is if I do drag into here, it makes it as a track. And if I hold shift and drag, it will load it as stems. For those of you who don't know what stems are, they've split them into drums, bass, other, and vocals, and you can isolate truly one of those stems, or all four, and make it whatever you want to do, which is so cool. You can alternatively, if you've got load knobs, you can click down, double push for the stems file, and single push for the track. These are just split from this. It's insanely good. I mean, you think a waveform is all one, and with the use of this software with AI and everything, to be able to pull this out and isolate it as well as it does is amazing. So on the left, we've got the drums, bass, other, vocals, we've got the volumes, we've got the filters, and we've got the FX sends as well. The FX sends means how much this is affected by the effects at the top. So we can now click, which will mute, on, off, like that, or we can have them on and affect the rotary. So let's have a play. I wanted to use this one in particular because I want you to know, honestly, it's not perfect. And I very much doubt it will ever be perfect, because we're extracting music and isolating it by frequency, and obviously some frequencies bleed over to another. So some are going to be better than others, and that's absolutely fine, but it's how you experiment. Okay, I don't want to get demonetized, but I just want to show you another track and what it can do. So I've got this song, and I'm going to right click, generate stems. While that's doing that, let's have a look at where it saves. So it will save where I want it to, and if I change that, I can, but it goes into here, and it changed the size to 19.7. So the Eminem songs go into a different folder, and it's changed it to 36.2. Now the Eminem track for me is 15.4 meg. So it's gone up quite a lot. So if, for those of you who are thinking, why can't I just select all of them and change them to stems? You totally can. But I've got a Mac Mini with a tiny little hard drive, and it's not going to work. So that's not for me. Obviously, you do you. So now if I load this, hold shift and load it, it's going to load it as stems. I can still change all the grid and queuing and all sorts of other stuff. And I've got vocals down there, which is correct. And I've got all these bad boys here. So if I take out the drums and the vocals and the other, okay, if I bring in the drums, sounds quite nice. There might be a little phasing on it, but again, it's not perfect, but it is damn good. So let's do that. Now I'm only going to have number 1 on, just the drums, and I can filter it. I'll show you. And I can also make it have effects. So I'm going to have it on 100%, and I can put a bit of flange on it just to reduce the wet. If I keep that on but only have it affecting the drums, then if I put the other on without the effect, we're getting off topic here, but some people might want to use those stems for something else, and you can make your own stems and put them into remix decks. So what we can do is we can have this on sync, have that sync to there as well, and we can play it. We got a perfect piece there. Drag that into remix set, and then you can have that on sync as well. Why not? Then you can treat that into your own little remix set. Pretty cool, hey? I know it's pretty cool. So the stems themselves are exactly the same with the drums, bass, other vocals. You can affect them in the same ways. You can generate them from any song. And I have tried this over and over again. Some work better than others. Don't expect a miracle, but also most of them were spot on and I could play with them. One thing that's really good, which I don't want to play because I don't want to get demonetized, are the vocals. They come out normally crisp as, and I've actually been using this for other things, and it's really, really cool. And also to note, if you want to, you can find this in your samples library, and if you go down to the bottom, you play this 3 times. And stop that, and then you can see I've got it down here, and if I want to, I can go to Show Track in Finder, and it's there as a WAV, and I can do whatever I want with that. Stick it in a DAW, flip it and reverse it, do whatever. So that's pretty cool. So even though it's amazing that you can generate the stems, you can also pull them apart, do whatever you want, mess them up. You know, it's pretty cool. I did mention that stem creation isn't perfect, but one thing it really does well is pick out the vocal. So I've downloaded this song from YouTube. It's a royalty-free song. It's not bad, actually. I'm just going to right-click and generate stems. This is the track while we're waiting. I quite like the vocals, so I might want to use them somewhere else. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to find a song. I really like this song, so I'm going to put it back to the beginning. And I just want to keep the bass and drums. Nice. And I'm going to make sure that the key lock works. So if that's 7D, let's go to 7M. And I'm just going to loop this bad boy. So we've got the stem now. Let's have a listen. Quite like that. Going to add a touch of reverb. Not too much. And let's find somewhere where it's going to kick in nicely. Maybe just a little bit too much. If you want to use the plus and minus and it is too much, you can see that's jumping about 13%. If you right click, you can do it to minimum, fine, default, coarse or switch. I'm going to do mine to fine so I can narrow it down just a touch more. So that should be good enough. Let's bang that on. Let's give this a sync and let's give that a sync. Let's change that to 1. That's 120, 125. So let's change that to 123. Let's meet in the middle. And let's give it a whirl. Bit of quantize. Bassline doesn't work. So let's bring that bassline. That's not too bad. So the bass drum works really well with that. The bassline didn't. It was in key, but I didn't like it. But you can see that you can now take parts of this and add it to others. While I'm here, let's go a little bit nuts. And again, let's change the key. So let's have a listen. What do I like on there? The atmosphere is nice. Now you may see that it says synths, drums, atmosphere and percussion. That's because this was made in Stem Creator and you can label them however you want. Instead of the default will be drums, bass, other and vocals when you use TRAKTOR PRO 4. But when you use Stem Creator, you can label them however you want. And I'll actually show you that in another video using RX11. So I quite like the atmosphere on here. Let's sync it up. Yeah, quite like that. So let's take that. Let's take that. Let's drop the volume down just a touch. That would help if I started on the one. Sounds all right. We need a bit of a top end though, something to play with. So let's go for... Yeah, I like that. So we're going to take the drums and SFX from that and let's give it a big old loop. So let's start building these up. And there we have stem generator. So the next thing we're going to look at is the flexible beat gridding. Now, I've done a video on this before about beat gridding and how it would be great to have this, and it's definitely a great addition. There's some caveats though, and I do want to show you those. So what I've done is I've taken a song from an artist called Track Tribe from YouTube. Good tune. I have taken on the right side, I've made it instantly faster, then instantly slower. Then on the left side, because I can't spell, that should say fast, then slow. I've gradually built up the speed and gradually decreased the speed, okay? That is more realistic to when you get vinyl rips or you're using bands, jazz, bands that recorded, artists that recorded with no click, that sort of thing. So let's do the easy one first. First thing we need to do is notice that when this came in, it's dropped a beat grid cue on here. So first of all, it's wrong. And second of all, it's interesting that it still makes a beat grid marker because I'll show you. First thing I always do is go to number 1 and delete. Now that's going to throw the beat grid off slightly. Just so you know as well, I've warped these in Ableton so I know they're dead accurate. So I notice they're already wrong. So if I drag down to the back or the beginning, I want it to be about there. Let's just say that's the first beat. What would normally happen is you would put it on number 1 and you would change this to grid. Now grid is missing now. We've only got cue, fade in and out, and load and loop. So what they've done is they've plonked it over to grid. And in grid, it all looks the same apart from these two here, the grid and the BPM. Now this says reset grid because if you've messed up the BPMs, you've not sure what to do, instead of having to go and do number 1, delete, I think this is quite cool. You can reset it here. And this is auto grid. So let's try that first. So I've put number 1 on. I'm going to press Q as well so it knows. And I'm going to... Are you sure you want to reset the beat grid? Yes. Okay, so it's taken everything off. One thing if you do notice though, it's left this marker here. So what we can do is use these arrows to go in between them. And I'm going to delete that because we don't want it. Now you can see that it's jumped back. I'm hoping this is just a slight, not bug, but once I got rid of one, I'd like that to have removed the beat marker as well. So let's go back to number 1 because we're happy with that. Let's go to grid. And now we have to put this on instead. So I'm going to set that. And now it's gone all the way. Okay, it looks pretty good to me. If we go back to the beginning and we put on sync. So far, so good. So I've upped the BPM from 124 to 152. Now it's an instant jump, so it will go 124 instantly to 152. So let's take a listen. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sandwich the part that goes faster. And I'm going to make sure snaps off because this doesn't look quite right. And I'm going to put a beat grid marker there. Now we know that this is the fast section. So let's zoom out a little bit. So let's wait for the fast section to finish. Right, so it's there. And again, we're going to put a grid marker. This should, if we go on now, I can now use this to see how far it's got and then adjust it. Let's just put that back there. Right, so it should be pretty much on now. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So we've taken this section, which is this sandwich section. It's not worked it out correctly, so we need to tell Traktor where it is. This is exactly like warping in Ableton. We'll put one on there. That's wrong. We'll put one on there. We'll put one on there. We'll put one on there. We've got to basically match up the beats. Now, it might seem a faff, but this is what you have to do for warping. So it's just the fact that DJs have got to do it now and not just producers. And we haven't got far to go, but I will skip this for you. Okay, eventually done. I've had to do each beat. It's not unusual. If you look at Native Instruments, they've done one where it just works perfect, and that's awesome, but I'm picking one that doesn't, and that doesn't matter because these things will happen. Let's just have a look. It's not going to be any different at the moment. Okay, so let's see if when we sync it, so let's just sync this now to 1, 2, 4. Now in theory, they should all be 1, 2, 4 now. Even the 1, 5, 2. Let's listen. Okay, that's actually quite impressive. That means that will work with any track now. If you did want the 152, you could do it the opposite way. So you could go here, change this to 152, which will make this bit fast and the other bit normal speed. So if we go... Nice. Like I said, bit of work, bit of prep though, doesn't hurt anyone. So we've got that retimed, and that is going to save like that now. If we want to reset the grid, if you want to reset the BPM, you can. Out of interest, can we lock it and delete a grid marker? So let's make a grid marker there, lock it, and then it locks out all those so we can't make a mistake. We can still flick between them. And you can see I'm not 100% accurate with this, so the longer you take, the more spot on this is going to be. And I'm quite happy with that. I could DJ with that, no worries, but it all depends on what you need it for. It just saves me taking it into Ableton, warping it, and bringing it back out again, because this would have never been able to do this on any of the other tractors. Now let's look at the fast and slow one. So this one slowly speeds up and slowly speeds down. Let's have a listen. Now this one, we're going to treat exactly the same. So this one on the right was an instant speed up and slow down. This one's a gradual speed up and slow down. First of all, we need to sort out our grid. So we're going to get rid of number 1. And again, it leaves that marker, which I don't like. So let's get rid of that as well. It's 2 jobs. Let's bring it back to the beginning. Let's set a marker there. And it instantly gives you a number 1, and it looks pretty good. So let's put another marker there. And you notice when I did that, everything behind it changed, nothing in front of it, which is interesting. Another difference between the 2 grid markings. So let's get to the end. Should be the end. Okay, let's go along just to make sure the behind it is fine. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. That's a bit off. So let's correct that. There we go. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Not too bad. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. So let's go back to this bit. Now, this gradually builds up. So we might actually have to do each beat as well. So let's have a zoom in and we can see where the grid marker is. And again, we just hit our markers just to tell them. Again, I'll see you on the other side of this. I wish I was on YouTube so I could just flick through this. Ta-da! Right, didn't take too long, but let's have a listen and make sure all my lines are up first before I hit sync. Good. Okay, now let's give it a whirl at 1, 2, 4. Sync. That's actually amazing. Again, it was only my impatience that made that not perfect, because that did exactly what I asked it to do, and that's amazing. So you're going to be able to take songs of any description and beat match them if you have enough patience, because that is pretty immense. Now, I'm just going to check it against something, so let's just pick this. You can use the click, but I just like to put it to a real world test. So if I cue this up and I cue this up here, doesn't really matter. So if I start this, so you can hear it pushing and pulling a little bit, but again, that's down to me, not the software. So I'm really, really impressed with that. Well done, Native Instruments. We've been waiting up for ages, and you've delivered. So, well done. And that is your flexible beat gridding by the one and only me. Let's lastly look at Pattern Player. So we go right to the top here. We can see a drop down, and we've got Pattern Player here. Now it instantly defaults to 50% volume. We've got an 808 kick. We've got a kick P1. You can change this, I'll show you in a second. The pitch, the decay, previous, next, and duck, and of course play. What this essentially is a 1-bar loop that will sync to the master clock. And if you have your beat gridding correctly on the songs, then it will sync to the songs as well. But before we get into matching them up, let's have a look at the buttons. So again, you obviously understand the 50%. There's your play. Now you can't hear anything because you have to assign it, so I can then put 1 on and have this playing. The volume will be dictated by that deck as well. Or should I say channel. When you stop it, it instantly goes back to the 1. And we can just plonk in anything we want. So let's just press play. It's that simple. It's a 1-bar loop. You can reset it by clicking the circle arrow, but then we've also got different types. So we've got a kick. Let's just put it on here. So we can change the pattern as presets. Double click, preset, stop. Then we have the pitch. Again, we can right click, minimum. Or fine, or coarse, or switch. Whatever you want. Then we have decay, which is how long the beat goes on afterwards. So it's like gated. Then we have our previous and next. Now this is just going through the kit. So we have a bass drum, clave, snare, clap, hi-hats, open and closed, shaker, etc, etc. Then we've got quite a lot of options, which is really cool. I'm going to check out Rebecca because she's hardcore, man. I mean, that bass drum is killer. Wow, that is hardcore. And then we've got duck, but we need to play the music for that. So let's go back to the 808 and let's just stick on this and we'll press play for this and this is all synced. Now just to hear a bit more. Now the duck is how much it goes over the song. A bit like a side chain. This can be done alongside your music. This can be done as well as. You could use it as intros. One student I used to have used to play the same bass drum and hi-hat under the whole mix without stopping. So that gave him a unique sound. So that's an option. And you can mess around with it. You can save a snapshot and then move on to the next one. Load snapshot and you get the pattern back. Now, you may think, oh, I don't want to use the FX1 and have to keep swapping and changing. And I also don't want to affect this deck. Well, actually, now it's in green and not orange, it doesn't affect this deck at all. It's just assigned it. So it doesn't affect it. But if you want to use Pattern Player as well as the effects, go into your settings, go into effects, change it to 4, and we will have 4 effects. Native Instruments, if you're listening, please could you move 3 into this space and 4 into this space. So let's make this as a group, and then we can make this the pattern player. Obviously it's a bit smaller, but it does the same job. The other thing is you don't need to use these decks. So if you want to have effects on these decks, you can. And where you've got nothing going on, if you don't want to use deck C for anything, you can use it in there. Doesn't matter whether you've got it on sync or not because it syncs to the master clock. So you can play like this. We can't see the pattern. So Native, please could you move it so we can see essentially, stop you 808. We can see everything on 1 and 4. That would be amazing because at the moment it's not unusable, but it's awkward. So you kind of have to have it on there to be able to see what's going on. Or even move it somewhere else. That would be brilliant because it's a pattern player. So we want to see this here. That would be really, really good. One thing you could use this for, I don't know, basically you could use it as a build-up. So if I was just putting this on here, and let's just highlight all these, and we're going to get to a build-up. Little touches. You know, you can do whatever you want. You can add effects depending on where you've assigned it. So that punches it up. So quite basic, but pretty cool. I'm sure there's a load of stuff you can do when you start mixing it into the hardware with any of the controllers, which I'm going to do another time. So if you want to see that, let me know, because I've got the F1, the X1 Mark III, and the S4, and the S2. So if you want to see me demonstrating on the physical controllers, please let me know. But this is just an overview of the software. Hopefully I've given you enough examples to start with, and if you've got any questions, let me know. Thanks ever so much for watching. As always, you are amazing. If you want to like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you want, and I'll happily revisit this answering all your questions. But until then, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.